Yes, I would imagine that the president is very concerned with this recent change in leadership over one of his most effective propaganda machines. So, I'm sorry, I meant to say, of course, social media company. Because as one of the primary beneficiaries of big tech censorship, Joe Biden stands a lot to lose if a free speech absolutist gain controls over the public square of modern day internet discourse, as, according to this study at least, big tech censored in favor of Joe Biden some 646 times over the course of the last 2 years. In other words, barely a day has gone by that some sort of criticism of the Joe Biden regime has not simply been whisked away off the internet, never to be seen again. And hey, he would have been equally worried no matter who would take over Twitter, right? Because, you see, there's a very careful and delicate balance of absolute neutrality that has been built up in big tech over the course of years, you see. A very careful balance of some 98-99% in favor of one political party. Don't get me wrong, it is a very careful balance, but the definition of balance, as the definition of so many other things, has subtly changed over the years. And it's not just the president that is very skeptical to the idea of a free speech absolutist gaining control of the modern day town square. The EU commissioner, or the overlord of das neue Deutsche Reich, is also a bit worried, you see. Thierry Breton here tells Chief Elon there are rules. Here in the EU, we are not particularly fond of free speech, you see. Which kind of is the problem. Now, Elon has already clarified when he says free speech, he obviously means free legal speech, bound by the laws of the land, the laws of the nations, and the laws of, well, everyday people have come together and decided via a vote. See, there's kind of the problem too. The EU is kind of like a super nationalist, unelected entity with basically zero oversight, so help us? American invasion when? Come on, the Germans are acting up again, and we really could need a little bit of help here, as, of course, in the EU, the various obligations that will be placed upon Twitter and its board will be that it fulfills the obligations including moderation, open algorithms, freedom of speech, transparency and rules, obligation to comply with our own rules for hate speech, revenge porn, and harassment. Freedom of speech is basically just tossed in there, so like, oh god, I would seem like a real villain if I didn't at least mention it. Because freedom of speech over here is very heavily curtailed in virtually every way you could possibly conceive. Moderation, for example. Moderation here means that Twitter and social media platforms have to moderate anything and everything which the governments deem to be unacceptable, whether that be misinformation, hate speech, harassment, yada yada yada. And our own definition of these things are quite a bit broader than the American definitions, as, well, again, free speech has become a distant tertiary concern to increased policing. I've been covering this for quite a few times over the years because, well, there are a lot of things that do need to happen regardless of whether or not Elon Musk gets in control of Twitter. Section 230, for example, in the US still needs reform because it is being abused by social media giants and tech giants in general to legislate via terms of service, something they should not be allowed to do. More stringent control of these platforms do also need to be carried out in the European Union and in European countries because the terms of service of Google, of Twitter, or Facebook cannot supersede the laws of Germany, of England, of France, of Norway, etc. Since we do also have a lot of legislation protecting us as well. Not as much as we could need, but yeah, there's a different topic. Actually, let's touch upon that right away since that's kind of the topic of the video, but something like hate speech, for example. Hate speech in the European definition is basically a set of special privileges that are doled out to certain classes of people, or identities more correctly, which are withheld from the rest of the populace. Now, that is not the theoretical legal definition, but it is the reality of the situation. Let me give you an example here. So this was a recent case in Norway where a 50-year-old man put a Facebook post, and he was convicted to 18 days of conditional jail time and a fine of about $1,500 for a joke on the internet. Why? Well, not because of defamation, but because of hate speech, because the joke was levied towards a certain group of indigenous people. This isn't America. We don't have an You know what the indigenous population of Norway is? Norwegians! I have some strong opinions on the Sami myself, or actually, let me clarify. Sami people are great. I don't give a shit about them. Although they're people living in Norway, in Finland, in Sweden, etc., and I think in Russia as well. It's simply just a different ethnic group. What I have a problem with is that we are giving them a lot of special benefits, like their own parliament, for example, or special protections under the law as found here. Let me read you the heinous insult that was worthy of sending potentially a 50-year-old man, sending a 50-year-old man to prison, potentially, for 18 days. Hello, they belong on the Vidda, which is basically the outback, essentially. Not here with their ridiculous clown costumes, they are marching around in. If you smell lighter fluid, a Sami is not far away with his 1.3 meters and his smell of fire. It's a poor translation, but basically what the guy is saying is that the Sami, which have a very colourful national costume, and which does look a little bit like a clown costume, I'm sorry, it kind of does, you can always tell that they're nearby because they smell like booze, basically. Like lighter fluid, like low-quality booze. This was the heinous crime that cost the man $1,500, and again, a conditional sentence of 18 days in prison. This does not happen if you insult another Norwegian. It simply doesn't. There is no hate crime protection for Norwegian citizens. It doesn't exist. And that is our definition of hate speech. That is the problem. Our freedom of speech is severely curtailed as it is, though we do also have certain protections against tech giants because, well, Twitter and the other Facebook media, censorship, blah blah blah, it has found itself in a race to censor. I made a video quite a little while ago about a British MP, was it Diane Abbott? I think it might have been. Essentially, she was of the opinion that social media companies should gather the social security number, the name and the address of people who use the service, so that the British government could go, we'd like all three of these, because we would like to arrest and prosecute people for the words they spoke on the internet. This was in response to social media being hammered repeatedly with more and more demands to deliver this information to government and take more strident moderation measures. The thing here too is, a lot of the social media platforms have, over the years, begun to realize, holy shit, are we responsible for a general degradation in public morality? Are we responsible for ever harshening political lines? Are we responsible for ever harsher speech regulations? Are we in fact helping police people's freedoms? Yes, you very much so are. And a lot of these social media platforms have been almost a little bit aghast at the strident nature of some of the demands levied against them because, well, there are bigger tyrants than Jack Dorsey out there. Difficult though that may be to believe. And of course, they will also be very careful to do this along very specific political lines. The EU Commissioner is not threatening Google when they are declaring that they are going to be spell-checking people's Google documents to make sure that they aren't using non-politically correct language like landlord and mankind. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. This is fine, but a free speech absolutist buying Twitter? Oh, now we have to start issuing warnings, you see, because if you don't follow our rules, we'll fine you and eventually ban you. Well, We'll see about that, will we not? What Twitter should be doing with this is simply go, alright, that's fine. We're gonna do exactly what you have requested us to do. In fact, we're gonna do a really great job at it. Whenever somebody from Germany connects to Twitter, we're gonna give them a little pop-up saying, hey, we see you're connecting from Germany, you're gonna be censored. Oh, and by the way, we're also gonna be curating and censoring your feed as well. We're not gonna show you certain things. And we don't want to do that. That's literally a demand from your government. So if you want to fix it, have a look at what Britain's currently doing with the European Union, I guess. Bit of malicious compliance is often the best way to solve some of this, because what we're seeing now is a lot of the ruling class, the politicians, suddenly looking at a major source of political influence and the ability to sway the masses, heading more towards a neutral standpoint, not even right-wing, simply going towards a central position of free speech, and everyone is outraged. The EU Commissioner, the President of the United States, is worried. That tells you just how comfortable they have become with utilizing the tools of censorship whilst keeping their own hands clean. Twitter, Facebook, social media, Google has been an incredibly convenient way of the government to go, no, we're not taking your rights away. It's big tech, you see. And to be fair, big tech has made it remarkably easy for them to make that excuse as well, because very often it's a valid excuse. As I have mentioned previously, if I have the option between somebody who is already actively screwing me, social media and YouTube, or somebody who might screw me, the government, I'm gonna have to side with the government. No matter how much the EU Commissioner's looming rape peen hovers ominously in the horizon. Thank God Norway is not a EU member yet. Although, we're working on that too. And hey, our politicians tend to sneakily enforce all pieces of EU legislation regardless, so I'm sure we'll get it. That whole hate speech thing, for example, you can guess who we have to thank for that kind of nonsense up here. Indigenous population. God, that triggers me so much. It is such an American term. The indigenous population of Norway. Anywho, until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.